Great. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to people around the world. This is Martin Hubel, your host of the DB2Night Show. Today is a ZOS show, number 108. Wow, where have the years gone? And I've got my special guest with me today, Dave Belke, speaking on security DB2 best practices, staying up with the threats. Dave, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Martin. How are you?
Oh, we're just looking forward to enjoying this summer weather we're having up here, and I'll be soon in the pool. And at the end of this show, I am footloose and fancy free for the summer, so I'm going to be in there more than one time. I guarantee you that. I was in it. I did 30 lengths yesterday. I might do 31 lengths today. I'm working up to it slowly.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah. As always, here's our social page, DB2Night Show on Twitter. If you want to hear about upcoming shows, make sure you subscribe to our hashtag there, DB2Night. And we've got replays and LinkedIn group. Replays are now on YouTube. If you don't want to have to download something onto your own machine, then that's another good thing. Here's our disclaimer. Copyrights are owned by the respective organizations. We record things and we make them available. And as soon as I get off this, I'll start working on it. Maybe I'll work hard, maybe I won't, but it'll get done certainly by Sunday, and the replay will be available along with a copy of the handout which Dave has graciously provided. So here's our agenda as always. New upcoming shows, stay tuned. I'll start publishing the agenda sometime in the August timeframe. We'll have shows starting again in September. Please, we've got a bunch of replays to watch. Please follow those up. You can get the handouts from the various shows if you don't have time to listen to them all. But all of that information is available on the DBI website. We also have a DBI, our founding sponsor of the DB2Night Show, makes available a demo that's available from the link shown there, or you can just go to the website and follow various menu to get there. And if you watch it, they'll send you a gift card. Also, our winner from our last show was Bill Gallagher of Travelers, and there's an Amazon gift certificate that has already been sent to Bill. That's what you get for watching the show. You can end up with a gift card. DBI, being our founding sponsor, likes us to certainly we like to mention that they have their tools available, and this is the main overview panel of the new version of the DBI software coming out, and it's really talking about service levels and identifying performance problems down to the problem SQL statement level if you needed to. Also showing various metrics which make it easy to know how well the various systems you have. These days, if you're a DBA on LUW, at the very least, you're probably managing somewhere between 15 to 20 environments, if not many more than that. So having a tool to help you do that in a way which allows you to communicate effectively with management and identify problems is a really good thing. And DBI has been doing that for, well, with their previous companies, well over 20 years for the DB2 LUW community. And here are our sponsors. We've got DBI people and myself, yours truly, Martin Hubel Consulting Inc. We are the sponsors of the DB2Night Show. Another one on transaction times for, that actually show the various service levels from the DBI software products. I meant to put this with the other one, but I forgot to do that because I'm really good at forgetting things. Amazing when you're a production crew of one, how many things get mostly done, but it's a really nice way of seeing how well things are doing in terms of service level agreements and reporting that to management. I wanted to put in a cartoon, seeing as this is what we'll be doing up here soon. It's how we deploy our sled dogs in the summertime in Canada. Just keep the dogs working, it's good for them, and you can have some recreational activities associated with that. So here we have a guy with a nice riverbed where the dogs are running and getting some water skiing in. They're really fast dogs, like dogs ain't going that fast. Either that or it's Photoshop. Perhaps it's the latter. All right, now let's go through and do our standard questions here. We've got some other questions that we'll put up as the presentation goes on. But here's our first one today: which things do you have currently in production? And it's always nice to see what people are doing. We've got a good-looking studio audience today. A number of people have signed in. It's renewed interest in security as certain things seem to go south in our IT world these days.
Yeah, security and performance are always the two most important things.
Yeah, security though, some people can, I remember I've got too many security stories from years of teaching classes as I did. But let's close that off and share the result with the newest things in production are mainly version 12, and that's great to see. Just one person on new function load by the looks of it. Let's move along and do the next one. What other DBMSs do you use besides DB2? Well, this includes DB2 on Z as well. I'm assuming everybody's going to click that one, but you get to click all the other ones. And I'm assuming, oh, look at that, almost everybody has clicked everything. That's never happened before. And I think we've got anybody that's going to vote has voted, so let's close that and share the results. We've got it's the Z audience. Most people are good, loyal IBM customers and have DB2 for LUW, and then there's other things hanging out there. I think it was about 10 years ago, I heard somebody still using Model 204, and I'm sure there are still people using that software today. Randomly thinking back in my old days of databases I've had to use. All right, I think I'm going to stop. What's that?
If it works, don't fix it.
Yeah, that's the thing. But we actually had Model 204. I was working for the government at the time, and we had one customer using Model 204, and they were not paying the whole. They were paying for a service, not paying the whole bill for that product. And so we got to a point where we went to them finally and said, you know, you're our only customer, and the reason we offer this as a shared service is to have multiple people use it. And if you're the only one, guess what? You're getting the bill. And it actually encouraged them to move away from it. Because it was a pretty
that's too bad.
Yeah. All right, with that, I've finished the polling questions for now. I don't know, did I share that one with everybody?
Yes, you did.
All right, I'll unshare it again. I'm really good at doing that. Now let's move along, and the next thing we have is you, Dave. So I'll tee you up over here, make you the presenter. And as always, you know what to click there.
Yep.
And I'll be standing by with the rest of your polling questions when you ask me to put them up. And
sounds good.
I'll do that. In the meantime, I'm going to mute myself, so if my dog goes off or other things in the background, you won't hear them. So
sounds good. I'll let you know after, like I said, after the slide numbers that we. All right. Talk to you soon. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. Today, I'm going to talk about DB2 ZOS security best practices and staying up with the threats. There are many things that I've been doing in my career. I've been a long DB2 person, and that's me and my standard stuff. I've been using ZOS since version 1.2. So I'm a consultant. Call me if you need me. So let's get going. Security is only as good as the weakest link, and DB2 security is something that we all need to concentrate on. This presentation is not going to talk about all the ancillary other products that IBM sells and other vendors sell, as far as firewalls, as far as monitors, as far as filters, as far as other things. Today we're going to concentrate on what you can do in the data management level, database level, for improving your security. But this is somewhat of a weakest link. If you got people that aren't taking care of the operating system, the networks, the cloud, Doesn't matter what you're doing these days, we're living in a connected world. And everything is a RESTful call. And it seems that the data for the new phone app is always on the mainframe. So you've got the weakest link of security and the devices on a phone that are coming into your DB2 system these days. So it's vital that you do as much as you can on the DB2 ZOS side to protect the data and protect the database. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk a little bit about the database itself and the various applications and getting taking care of all these threats. So DBAs and the data management folks are always blamed for everything. So the system administrator, DBAs, everything that happens to the data is your fault. And security is a complexity, and the number of transactions, the millions and billions of transactions that come into the system these days is quite extraordinary. And the variety of levels of software, the authorized people that come in to your company's data is just amazing. So you need to make sure that you do as much as you can in the database definition, the database network configuration, the database storage level, and all the interrelated relationships that you have. So you want to make sure that you do as much as you can on the database side. Looking at the statistics and looking at the reports from CrowdStrike, IBM, FireEye, all the various vendors that are out there, the biggest problem is technology updates. If you look at cyber defense for the government, 99% of the hacks are because of outdated technology. So for those of you in the survey that were DB2, a little behind the screen or behind in your maintenance, I encourage you to get caught up with all the version 12 activity that's been going on for 3 or 4 years now, and look at all the software technology stacks that you have in your company that access your DB2. Evaluate and audit all the services and controls that you have, and look at the vulnerabilities that they have. This is something that should be an ongoing application, yearly disaster recovery drill type of scenario. I try to make sure that when I'm working with my clients that they do at least a yearly maintenance review of the vendor viability. Was the vendor just taken over? The overall version age of the software that you're on, the patch level, and the patch frequency. One of the things that they really try to hammer on these days is all the open source software that's out there. The open source software is Swiss cheese, very holy as far as security is concerned, and it can get outdated and misused or abused by hackers very easily. And in the reports that I'm talking about, there's the IBM, CrowdStrike, and the Akamai. In the IBM X report, they talk about all the unsecure cloud storage that is wreaking havoc for companies out there. One of the things that's really become amazing is people concentrate on the cost of cloud storage and how cheap it is. Well, what they miss is the security vulnerabilities that putting your information in the cloud has, and also the added cost of reading and writing, encrypting, and taking care of your data on the cloud. So you really want to look at what's happening with your data and what things are available on the cloud and what things are not available on the cloud. One of the big security things, security breaches that was experienced in 2018 and 2019 were problems with configurations of Kubernetes, of Docker, of some of the cloud infrastructure at Amazon, at Microsoft. So it's not that these cloud environments are unsecure per se, but it's the people that are using them don't know how to configure them and tighten them up appropriately for their environments. So think about that. 86% of the records were compromised were from a cloud misconfiguration. And then also, a lot of the phone apps that we have in the various stores that are out there, more the Google store than the Apple store, but 70% of the mobile and desktop apps use open source, and that open source has bugs. And that leads to security vulnerabilities within your environment. And if you have a phone app for your company, you're probably using some of that open source software, and it may be a vulnerability for your application and for your data that's being done. So you really want to look at these reports. It's quite astounding. These are not small reports, but they're really good for giving a overview and detailed information of what's happening in the industry as far as security is concerned. And where that relates in your security settings is where these apps come in. So in the DB2 environment, we have the ability to have various IPs, various virtual IPs, and have those transactions, dynamic routing of those transactions to particular data sharing members, or particular LPARs, or particular transaction profiles. So what you want to make sure that you have within your DB2 ZOS security review process is where the IPs and the connections are coming into your DB2 system. This is really important in that a lot of, for example, I was at a client where we had a Hadoop partner that was using some of our transaction DB2 data, and we had that information being flowed into the Hadoop system. So we had that IP and those things defined within the DB2 system. Well, that Hadoop system went down in flames because it couldn't keep up with the performance requirements, but the systems people forgot to take out that IP address and that IP connection. So that easily could have been taken advantage of by hackers. So you really want to make sure that the list that you have as far as the IP names and the various definitions for VIPA and DVIPA TCP/IP connections is really minimized within your environment. Next thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you start creating some of your documentation. And since DBAs get blamed for everything, you want to start to understand the application technology base that you're working with. Understand the version and the patch history of all the applications. As I said before, the open source is really suspect, especially old open source. And also you want to make sure that you take a real close look at the version of Java that you're running in your production environment. When I do security audits out there, it's amazing how old some of the application code really truly is that is running some of the major systems for major Fortune 50 technology companies is out there. So what you want to do is as a DBA, just in the lifecycle documentation, if at all possible, start to socialize and document and audit the various application technology bases, and get a good understanding of those technology bases and how they're referencing your sensitive proprietary data. And just take note of it. Try to document all the services and the shared application points. This is very important because everything is an interface these days. But the other thing that's really, really important is document the install, the configuration, and the security definitions of the configuration, because that's where most of the problems occur within your security environment. Is the configuration is just not up to snuff, or the configuration is left something questionable. So you really want to look at those interfaces. Now, every year there's surveys, but every year it seems that the probability of being hacked continues to go up. Last year it was 25.6%. This year it's 27.7%. So you need to really stay up with all the documentation and all the interfaces so that you understand as new releases come out, or if as maintenance comes out, how important it is to apply that, especially when you're talking about administrators and vendors that you work with. So Martin, I think it's time for our first question. You want to take back and do that?
Actually, I might not have to take it over, but let me just see if I can do that right now.
Okay.
I've got the poll going. You're still in charge.
Okay. So I should just continue on. They can answer that question, or
give them a minute. It's distributing right now. It says.
Okay.
Collecting responses.
Great.
People are responding as we speak.
Can I display that at all?
I don't think I can display it to you. I'm watching it myself.
I'd like to see what the results are.
And we'll do that in just a minute. That's important. But I have to collect the results, and then I can share the results. I wish I could share them with you as they're coming in, like blow by blow description. But I've got my
vote and vote often.
All right, I've only got about half the audience voting, so I was hoping to get more, but let's move along and share that with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. What do I do?
It should be saying, oh, you've got to be able to display the GoToWebinar screen. Do you have a second monitor?
No, I don't.
Okay, let me describe it to you.
Okay.
Our DB2 applications have a security rating of excellent. People said 0. Above the rest, code changes are evaluated for exposures, 33%. Good. Security is part of the development lifecycle, that's 17%. And average, security is reviewed most of the time. And poor or unknown, security is not reviewed, that was 0. So you've got between above the rest and average are the response ranges.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Okay.
Well, it's encouraging. So let's go forward here. Get back. Can you see my screen?
Yep, you're back on.
Okay, great. So the next thing, since most of you are doing some good things with your security, one of the things you really want to make sure is these new RESTful applications come into your DB2 system as a phone app or as a new services architecture or something like that, make sure that they're using TSL. And TSL has been around for a while. It's part of the Federal Information Processing, the FIPS 140-2, and DB2 ZOS has been a leader for this in many, many years. This is an old slide that I've had in several of my security presentations, and I took it out, but I was recently at a client and they were still using SSL internally for some of their internal applications, and I was a bit surprised and taken back. So I encourage everybody to make TLS their standard and to make sure that they're evaluating all their IPs that are coming into their system, and they're looking at the patterns that are happening. The reason TLS is so important is because if you only have the lower level SSL, you are vulnerable to a man-in-the-middle hacker attack, and you don't want to put your systems at risk, even if they're internal systems only behind the firewall. You really want to make sure that everything that you talk to in your ZOS system is encrypted. So it seems that more and more they're pushing down the security management and the security responsibilities down into the organization. The board of directors is talking to the CIO is talking to the security officer doesn't want to talk about it, so he passes it down to the chief data officer, and he doesn't want to talk about it, so he pushes it down to the DBA. So this is where, as a DBA, you have to become involved, because everybody's pointing the finger at somebody else of who's responsible for the security and who's responsible for the entire technology stack. So what you want to make sure that you have is you have a technology inventory that understands the service or the version levels and the patch levels that you're at. You want to document your security procedures that you have when you bring a new application into your organization or it's under development, and you understand and can document the security audit tasks that were done during the various agile scrums and various sprints that were being done. So you want to make sure that you have that application maintenance schedule and how security was being addressed. And this is the circle of life of the technology inventory, the management, the risk management, the vulnerabilities. You remediate them, you do your action, and you start all over again. This is especially important with the new applications as they're coming in. One of the things that some of these surveys and things that you find out is normally DBAs don't have a lot of security documentation. The RACF people, ACF2 people, usually the ones that have a plan of protection. But I was working with a Fortune 500 company, and I asked them what their cyber breach response plan was, and the guy made the snide remark of putting his resume out on the web for finding a new job. You really want to have a good understanding of where your legal liabilities are. I think I've just been unfortunate in that every hack that you've heard about over recent years, from the Target hack to the OPM hack to the other hacks that have happened, I've been a victim of. So it's very important that as a DBA person, you target your various or inventory your various targets, understand where your social security numbers, your key IDs, your customer numbers, your credit card numbers, anything that is PII information, where it's referenced, And as a DBA, we hopefully know the data, and we should know and drive those processes and those securities issues. Usually it's better to have the documentation ahead of time and not be driven by the security issues. So it's very important that you, you gain an inventory of this information and get an evaluation and start communicating that security information, and I believe you'll have a positive response from your upper management so that they can understand the security profile and what things really need to be taken care of by applications. And one of the best ways to discuss this with upper management is talk to them about the costs of a breach. If there is a breach, it could cost you hundreds of millions of dollars, and it could cost the CEO, the chief security officer, the data officer, all those people their jobs. So you rarely ever get any pushback when you say you need to work on security. So use that as your leverage for getting budget and getting time to do these types of things. Now, this is one of the great charts that I stole from Northrop Grumman. This is fairly old, but it details the various application areas and the cloud and the public and private cloud and all the different data at rest and network access controls that you're having. What you want to make sure that you do is you interface with all the people that control all of this so that the communications between all these different layers to your database is 100% encrypted. So this is a multi-tiered, multi-faceted security scheme of things, but you need to have a standardized security reporting, because you could be talking to 20 different people when you talk about all the people in operations, in the policies, in the configurations of all of these layers. So you want to make sure that you start to build those relationships and that you reflect your understanding of the multi-tiered access and how they're using two-factor authentication, and that all the devices that are coming into your database and coming into your application are trusted and have been pre-verified, and that all the applications that are within this sphere of access to your system have gone through a testing technique so that they understand the security and the standardized aspects of it, and that you have monitoring and auditing of every access point, or every tool can be used so that you can understand where the data security is and where the application security starts and the system security ends. This is very important. Again, most of the times on ZOS, we're looking at a RACF or an ACF2, where 3 strikes and that person is out. But in ZOS these days, we're using so many trusted contexts, pre-approved plans. Hopefully no plans are granted to public. So you really want to make sure that you understand where your liability is. And again, this is really important also, is you want to understand where your production testing or your protection for the production data starts and ends. I was recently working with a client that had a 2-tier storage environment for their ZOS. They just purchased the new DS8800s, and they also purchased the encryption license. But that pool for that encryption was only in the production environment. So even though they had the production environment encrypted, they didn't have any of the other environments encrypted. So you want to make sure that you understand where your device exposure also is. You know, we don't really think about the storage devices anymore these days in the, you know, in the ZOS environment. It's just the storage people take care of it, and it's, you know, purchased, and the channel connection, and, you know, the storage pool is defined, and away we go in our DB2 environment. You want to make sure that not only is your production environment encrypted, but all the copies that you may have in a performance environment or in a testing environment, verify that those security IDs and all the people that have references or authorities to the DB2 underlying data sets, all of those IDs are referencing encrypted data. So you want to make sure that you document who has availability to this. This usually is a good, time to do that is during your disaster recovery tests, and you can understand when and who in operations has the power and approval to redefine some of your data sets in those environments. One of the other things that's always happening in the interconnected world also is that ZOS is not an island. We have many Linux environments, and we also have many tier 2 and tier 3 connections. And in some of those environments, those people can change their user IDs. You want to make sure that you have a listing and an understanding of where these people can do that changing of their IDs, because many times those become a security exposure also. One of the things that I'm very enthusiastic about when I do security audits is making sure that all group IDs are the only things that are being done or being used within an environment. No individual IDs have authority over objects within your environment. Every access should be then associated with a role. This is very easy and very good to then put into reports to see where any anomalies outside of those situations. One of the things you can also do is use the decrypt bit, decrypt car, decrypt DB functions. You can verify your encryption within your database. There's also, like I said before, the built-in facilities, but you have to spur management to buy the encryption licenses. One of the things that's really funny is when people are talking about open source Hadoop or Postgres or any of the open source databases that are out there these days, they're always talking about getting encrypted storage. Well, you know, encrypted storage has been around forever within the mainframe, but it's amazing how many people in the ZOS environment don't buy the extra encrypted license. So you really want to make sure that you have your management budget for that so that they can have the encrypted storage behind the scenes. Martin, time for another question.
Radio. The next one here is launch. What level of security documentation is generated during your application life cycle and maintenance? We're distributing the poll and collecting the things. We're getting
I can't see it.
Detailed usage, good details, little or not enough, none, or not my job. I wish there was a way to make sure you could see that.
Let's see.
Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to make you an organizer.
Okay.
And then your menu should expand and you should see the polls. You have a polling thing now?
No, I don't.
On your GoToWebinar menu, it should have become a lot larger.
It did.
Okay, and
Let's see at the poll here. Okay.
all right, so let's shut that off and we'll share the results with our fine looking studio audience. We have what level of security documentation? One is good details, little or not enough, are both at 20%, and 60% answered not my job. So we'll hide that for now.
Okay.
And we will, is that the only question you want to answer right now?
Yeah, that's fine. We'll just.
All right, I'll
got
turn
other
it back
ones.
to you, and
Thank you.
Your stream.
Okay. One of the things that can be your job with the security aspects is designing your database. And this is what I've done with some clients with some recent projects that I've been on, is where we put in steganography. And steganography is basically the art of hiding something in plain sight. And this is a best practice for databases going back, decades. This is something where even if the data is stolen, they'd have to do some extra work to figure out what the data really means. And steganography is, there are many, many different ways to do it. I'm going to show you only a couple in this presentation. I could do a whole presentation on steganography, but basically what you're doing is you're splitting tables, you're splitting columns, you're putting data procedures in place, you're doing special auditing, you're doing column security, you're doing element access controls, you're doing column masking, you're doing column obfuscation. Steganography can take on many different ways, but I'm going to show you one way where you can take an existing database that has social security number, and we're going to salt and pepper, which is another technique for securing your data with no changes to the database, but we're going to make that social security number more secure. So the real social security number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the customer's first name is John, so it starts with a J. So because of that, the application and all the retrievals, we are going to shift it by 5 positions, and we're going to insert 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That data shift is the salt and pepper and the steganography. So now when you're referencing that, all your applications understand that the data shift has happened within that social security number, and the real one for that person named John is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that data shift is the steganography, or salting, peppering your database that's happening. One of the other method of steganography is, instead of having the social security defined only as 9 bytes, you define it as 11 bytes. So that you can add 2 bytes of overhead, which is basically nothing these days when compression and encryption is managing your data, 2 extra bytes for protecting your data. By putting it, and by putting extra fields, by padding the 4th and the 6th digit at the front or in the back of it, we now insert 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then a 6 into the 11 digits of the social security number. if this data gets hacked or if this data gets referenced outside of somebody that's not an insider threat, they're not going to know what that social security number really should be. So you really can easily protect your PII information, and you can do the same thing with credit card numbers. You can do the same thing with patient numbers. I've used this technique on several systems where it's worked out very nicely, and it's something that if you design it in the front or put it into a yearly maintenance cycle, it can be very simply and very easily done within the environment and within the applications. And very quickly and very easily, you can put this steganography technique and protect your data. And the cost of doing this through the various applications is a pittance compared to the hundreds of millions of dollars if everyone's social security number was stolen. So you really want to look at doing these simple types of steganography things that can help protect your data. There's also a lot of built-in DB2 functionality that is built-in steganography somewhat. And DB2 functionality has encryption-like with redefined columns in different encoding formats. What I'm talking about, instead of that social security number being a decimal, it could be defined as a character representation in the database. And it could be defined as a single byte character. It could be defined as a double byte character. It could be defined as mixed bytes. It could be defined as binary. It could also be, most of us use episodic tables. You could use and redefine that social security to be Unicode encoded. Now there's some restrictions around these different data types, and you want to test out how you're referencing them. But this is a good way of encrypting or restricting this data or encoding this data in a different scheme so that you can still have it on your database and the applications can understand, okay, when I need to go after the social security number, I need to reference it in a Unicode process. And that's very easy to have the applications take care of. In addition to that, you can then put row and column access controls around it and then have permissions based on users and values. Again, there's some DB2 overhead to the row and column access, but there's not a lot of overhead to a different encoding scheme because the data is going to be there. It can be evaluated in SQL statements very easily. And, you can set up column masks also. These are some of the built-in functions. And there's, good information in the manuals on doing that. The biggest issue I have with some of these extra controls is the performance impact that they have on various applications. So I'm more in favor of encoding different PII columns with the different encoding schemes that I've got there. The other aspect, when you start to talk about the environment, you want to make sure that you don't give the hackers any extra available information or any extra time within your DB2 system. One of the attributes of the target hack of credit cards was the hackers came in through a ventilation system application, and they were able to then move laterally across the technology base and then find the system that worked the customer credit cards, and they were able to then grab all those credit cards. So you want to make sure that you hide all the technology version numbers and information that you've got. This is especially important for protecting any web addresses or web servers that you have, especially older web servers that are out there. Also, you want to remove any of the unnecessary server processes. One of the big problems that they have when you install a open source server these days, it comes with a lot of functionality that you probably aren't going to use. You want to take out all those executables, if at all possible, so that all the open source that you have is basically only the stuff that you're going to need. You want to make sure that you start to minimize your timeout values, the number of connections, and all the other things that are happening within your system. You want to make sure that the limit sizes and the reply sizes, so that if anybody tries to download a table's worth of information or a huge amount of information, that they're flagged and disapproved from doing that. The other thing, I'm surprised at some of the old stuff that is still in some of the DB2 catalogs that is out there. If you have null ID packages, the logs are available to anybody, so anybody can see what executes or what is causing problems or what errors are happening. Also, a lot of systems don't have trusted contexts, connections. Everything that connects to your DB2 ZOS system should be in a trusted context connection or something that has been truly verified within your environment. So again, let's talk about frameworks. I can't believe it's already 50 past the hour. One of the things that you go in when you look at the various applications that are happening is you want to make sure that the application frameworks, the modules that the programmers are using, is secure. One of the big favorites that I've seen at many clients is Spring and JSF. Struts also seems very popular these days. The old versions of Spring are very vulnerable to attack. The old versions of struts is also very vulnerable to attack. You can do memory overloads within the environment, within these struts and Spring environments, and these packages are security nightmares because of their, you can do a memory attack, you can do overload of different variables, and some of the configurations are very vulnerable to attack. So you really want to look at what frameworks you're working within your environment. The other thing is, if the environment, has security issues, or if it has XML or other aspects, you want to make sure that you get the latest and greatest APIs and certificates from those open source projects. One of the things that I found on a recent security audit was they had migrated the old version of the configuration forward into the new version, and the configuration was still loose as far as security was concerned. So you want to make sure that you update the configuration to the current conventions and encrypt all the files that are needed. One of the things you also want to make sure is all these open source things can add matchers for APIs. You want to make sure that the API needs to be invoked before the filter is. So the filter is only applied to the URLs matching the pattern. And this is the way you can filter out some of the data somewhat related to the VIPA, DVIPA comments that I was making earlier. So you want to make sure that the frameworks get a full review of what's happening and that the security within the frameworks. One of the things that is, age old since the beginning of time was SQL injection. And it is just amazing when I come in and do a performance or an audit on a security and a performance review, I find so many Java or NoSQL databases that have vulnerabilities to SQL injection. It is just amazing. One of the things you want to look at all the time is any old Java libraries that you have out there, because some of these old Java libraries are vulnerable to attacks, and especially any open source that you might have within your environment. There's huge vulnerabilities in open source. So what you want to make sure is you have an architecture that's always secure and always encrypted. And if anything is not secure or encrypted, communicating with your DB2 system, you really, really should take a hard look at it and understand that is a huge vulnerability for your environment. The other thing is, if you have a situation where you're going across machines from tier 1 on the mainframe to tier 2 environment, a lot of the tier 2 applications are logging and monitoring and publishing that log on the tier 2 environment. And they're doing this for debugging. I was recently at a client where they had the debugging information and the logging of that information wide open. So if a hacker came in, they could look at that production log within the tier 2 system and use that information to attack the ZOS system. So you want to make sure you do a code review to turn off the inappropriate debugging information or audit information, and that you have a true trusted and encrypted log that has security wrapped around it on your different platforms. One of the things that you can do is just document this stuff. Just documenting it can bring a huge relief to everybody. And at least by identifying it, you know what your vulnerability is, and maybe you can clean up that log or set up a process to delete that log after an hour, so that the information doesn't hang around on the other system too long. And you can find various compromises with the applications. But understand and document and sort of give a risk rating of every application that references your DB2 environment. It's really important that you start the security conversation with upper management so they understand when maintenance money is allocated that they need to allocate some maintenance money for some of these older systems to bring up their versions of software, to patch some of these holes that have happened, and take care of these security issues within the environment. It's real important to do that, and I can't stress it enough to do a risk rating. Martin, it's time for another question.
I'm on it.
Okay.
Here we go.
See if all right.
The question is, what security mechanisms have you implemented into your database? You have the standard stuff, roles and storage encryption, row or column-based access controls, or steganography, all of the above, or none of the above, because it's handled by somebody else. We've got a pretty good voting response for this time of within the presentation. I'll share the result there. You see that.
Great.
We see that we have 70% do the standard stuff. We have 20% doing all of the above. That's great. And we also have tools and or storage encryption as well. So good.
That's great. That's
Encouraging.
well, I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad I can validate that everything is happening.
All
Let's
righty.
see.
And
All right. Can you see my screen?
we can. We're back on.
Okay, great. Well, if you're gonna look at any situation within your security landscape, the most time you want to spend is where the application gets authenticated. You want to make sure that you spend the most time in getting people in the door that are approved. So whenever you can spend time, look at how things are being authenticated within your environment. The wrong version of software, the wrong versions of technology, you want to make sure that you have as much two-factor authentication as possible. You want to make sure that that's all the things that are happening out there. You want to make sure that the authentication is where you spend your time and money. All the other technologies and all the other things are always after the fact type of security mechanisms. If you can authorize and authenticate everybody that comes into your system, you'll never have a security issue. So, governance, risk, you want to make sure that you start to do that with all your security conversations that you have with upper management. You want to make sure that you no longer have any user IDs that have individual authorities, and use row and column access and steganography techniques are built into your database designs and your DB2 system. You want to make sure that you minimize the performance impact of the row and column access, and make sure that the row and column access aligns with your update and insert authorities, so that you don't have a huge performance hit for those access controls. One of the things that I've talked a lot about, technology versions and everything else, one of the best ways that you can understand how hackers are coming into your system is by looking at the attackmiter.org website that is in the middle of this. What MITRE has done a very good job of doing is talking about the different episodes or different phases of an attack. Initially gaining access to a system, moving laterally across the system, discovering or researching PII information, gathering that information, and then exiting the system, and then removing their records or destroying the logs that show that they were in the system. The most successful hack is one that isn't known. So that is that attack.miter.org gives a good understanding of the different ways and different things that can happen within your various applications. The other thing is there's common vulnerabilities and exposures. There's a national database of the various software levels, and this documents the problems with all the open source databases and open source software that's out there. Old versions of, like I said before, Spring and JBoss are really vulnerable. So this vulnerability database documents all the known vulnerabilities within the software that you may have running within your system, and gives you a good frame of mind to look at these various processes and software levels and software versions. You can very quickly do a search for your level of software and see if there's any liability that you might have or any issues that you might have. Doing this type of research at budget time is really good for making sure that the vulnerabilities are documented and the maintenance levels can be taken care of for it. Trend Micro is another great company that does things, and I stole this graphic for sniffer attacks, denial of service attacks, compromised key attacks, passwords, these threats and these scenarios. It's amazing that a majority of attacks come from executives clicking on attachments that they shouldn't, links that they shouldn't follow, and emails that they don't follow their training for. The cloud providers are always saying my cloud is more secure than theirs, but through the surveys and through all the things, 86% of the time the cloud is unsecured or secured improperly and allowing hackers in. So you got to understand your threat landscape. You understand where your attacks may come from, but the ZOS environment is really good to take care of it. Now, one of the things that I've done is prepared a lot of the SQL to go after your DB2 catalog. These SQL statements can document the various authorities and various conditions that you have within your DB2 environment. And these you should be able to cut and paste from the PDF. One of the things you want to make sure that you do is before you revoke anything, make sure that there's not anything using it. Public is not your friend. Joe Public should be out of your catalog, and you should have everything defined to a specific user ID or specific situation. Notice that all of these queries fetch the first 10 rows and with UR. So they shouldn't cause any locking, but it is amazing. I use these queries in my security audits. It is amazing the information that you can find with all the authorizations, all of the trusted context, the trusted context that is no longer used, or it's used only occasionally, and why is it only used occasionally? So this can bring to light many bad situations that you might have with user IDs and authorities or overprivilege within the environment. Here's some queries that do the audit policies and also document the information about roles that are defined within your environment. And all of this information matches up with the RACF or ACF2 stuff that is happening. So you want to make sure you get with your security people and match up this information with them. Again, the audit policies, the various information about the authorities within the tables, within the environment, within the routines that you've got. Also, user IDs, understand where individual user IDs might be in there. I'm not a big fan of having any user IDs, if at all, or minimizing the user IDs that are in your system. You want to make sure that you minimize that so that RACF and ACF2 take care of things. Excuse me. Also, the DVIPA and VIPA connections that I was talking about earlier, here's the queries that can document the various connections that you've got in your environment also. So with that, and with all the things that I'm talking about, tighten up your infrastructure, make sure you understand the security definitions and review that at least once a year. Integrate the risk assessments into maintenance, because that programmer that just started, that's doing changes to your system, doesn't know the security standards. He just graduated from college, he's got a little training, and he doesn't know the security profiles. Eliminate access IDs and redefine controls to roles and RACF or ACF2 or the security package as much as possible. Know where your high value elements are. Use the encoding DB2 facilities, also the row and column access controls, the masking and the passwords, and the steganography methods to protect them. Make sure that you encrypt all your data, especially all your data at rest, because backups need to be encrypted. Archives, any copies, anything. Monitor and log all your activity, and protect and encrypt your logs, and start a audit and documentation today. So thank you very much, everybody, for your attention today. I really appreciate it. And when possible, also look into supporting the IDUG, International DB2 User Group Virtual Conference. Any questions now, or email them in to me later, and I'll be happy to answer. And follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn if you get a chance. Martin, back to you.
Right, I've got 2 more polling questions we didn't get to. One is,
go ahead and go for them. Yeah.
We won't spend too much time because we want people to get on with their lunch here in their time zone. But let's get an idea here. We've got people voting quickly, and thank you for that. Clearly, people are paying attention, and we'll shut that off now and share their result with people. Security audits have been done. Every application change is reviewed by security. I've got one person said that. Major changes and when applications are developed, 33% there, and the other one is a while back. So people have been doing them from time to time. It seems that people are getting better at doing those. That's great.
Yeah.
This one is catalog queries. They'll launch. And that that's being distributed. It's just taking a moment here. So now we're collecting. Need to be run for useful information, and shows some old authenticate authorizations that might be necessary. And some of them give them to the security department to follow up on. So we're seeing the results come in on there and aren't necessary because it's not my job. Close that off and share the result there. Nobody says their catalog's clean. It's one of those questions, if they do answer that that's the case, I would still be wondering about
it. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And the final question for today, one of our always important ones, is, did you learn anything today? And as expected, getting lots of people voting on that, and the answer to that one is everybody did. As one
awesome.
We want that from our shows, and we expect it from a great show like this. So that's no surprise there, but it's good to see. And with that, I'm going to take back control to put up the final screen here. Let me just grab that.
Great.
Thank you so much again for a great show. Dave, it's always good to have you on. I hope you have a great summer. Great IDUG next month. They're having their virtual conference. And we'll see people on that in the middle of next month. So with that, let me just
thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. And there's our final slide saying thanks for coming. And thanks to DBI for being our founder and host of the DB2Night Show. And with that, I will say good night. Or good evening, good afternoon. See you later. Start our music. And once again, thanks for coming, and we'll see you in the fall. Please look for updates over the summer.
Take care, everyone.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.